Hey y'all, this is Jamie Nelson with Equilibrium Counseling Services. I wanted to check in today and say hello and just share a little bit of information with you. I have this cool nifty way of talking about anxiety and depression and how we kind of fluctuate throughout the day that I always share with my clients, typically in our first session, but we often refer back to it. I learned this when I was doing the Trauma Resiliency Model training called TRIM. They also have CRIM, which is the Community Resiliency Model. And I think it's a really awesome way to learn how your nervous system responds to different situations, a way to kind of creative language to start tracking that and to know where you are throughout the day. So I have made a couple little changes to it that fit with my clients or just kind of how I process information, but the foundation of this was created by TRIM. So I'm going to take you through that. I have a previous video on fight, flight, and freeze, which is the way in which our nervous system responds in threat situations. So I am going to be referring to that in this video. If you have any questions, refer back to that one. But it's basically, we have three major biological responses. We either fight back, we freeze, or we flee, we run. And that's controlled by our nervous system. And I'm going to go back into a little bit more on that. All right, so first we're going to go ahead and jump into the diagram. Okay, so this is kind of our main diagram. We have when the nervous system is hyper aroused, that means it's up. That's when we go into that fight or flight. So that's the anger or the anxiety. When your nervous system is feeling kind of impulsive and reactive and you act before thinking, that's hyper aroused. And then opposite of that is hypoaroused. That's when our nervous system is subdued or depressed. That's the freeze response. That leads to the reactions of depression or feeling unmotivated or slow. This middle area, this is when we're okay. This is when we have resiliency, when we're tolerant of different experiences, when we're kind of chill, when we live through the life and it's just kind of like, all right, cool, I'm going to go with it. So in an ideal world, we live in here. The day there can be some positives. It stays within this like neutral okay space. We can have some things that are low, like I got my test score back and that was a negative experience, but I can tolerate it. Or there was a pop quiz, or someone cut me off on the freeway. I'm having a reaction, but I can tolerate it. So what kind of goes along with this is then the idea that we have different sort of reactions. So if there's a situation to where there might be a trigger, and a trigger is a thing that causes a reaction. It triggers a reaction. So it might be that we're going through the day and then, oh my gosh, pop quiz, boom, you shoot up into anxiety. And then what happens a lot is when we shoot up here, we get stuck. And now the person is living in this anxious space. And things don't come back to this okay zone. They stay up here in this very anxious, negative, reactive feeling. So that's when we see somebody being very irritable or anxious all the time or have a difficult time going into situations. Now, triggers can also go the opposite, that you get some bad news, there's a trigger, and boom, you're down here. And you're living in this sort of depressed place. And it's hard to come back and feel okay. And the idea of feeling okay and feeling depressed are so far apart that it's hard to comprehend that and to get back into that space on your own. There are then other times that our okay zone, this okay space, gets so small. Like, look at how small that is compared to our previous diagram. And this can happen throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout our life. Think about if you maybe didn't sleep the night before. Your ability to be tolerant of other people's reactions is going to be much smaller. So then what we see happening a lot is now we're bouncing. And a person is living either from positive to anxious to depressed, and their time spent in this okay place, that chill, that relaxed time, is so small that it's almost non-existent. And this is usually where people are when they show up in my office. And that's what's so frustrating, because what they're finding is, oh my gosh, you know what? Last year, I was able to tolerate this. I could handle my workload. I could handle things going on with my family or my friends. But this year, I just can't. It's not making sense. And what I noticed with that is when the resiliency or tolerance goes down. the ability to feel okay decreases. So what our work is in therapy is to try to start to expand this, to increase the space in which we feel okay. That's where we start to notice what are these things, where we start listing what our coping skills are to help get us to that place. So then what the goal of therapy is that we want to start to be able to identify what a trigger is, and we can't take away the response we have to a trigger, so we might still escalate, but the goal is that we can come back down into this place. So we're essentially turning down the volume. We're not coming up here and getting stuck, but we visit it and we can come back down, because we can't take away the fact that we have trauma responses, or getting in a car accident is scary, or if we have social anxiety, that those don't go away, but we can turn down the intensity. So what I try and identify with my clients is, one, can we identify what the trigger is? And then we make a self-care sandwich, which means we pay attention to before, during, and after a traumatic response. So we want to know, can we anticipate it? Well, what do we do beforehand? Is there something I can do to take care of myself if I know a trigger is coming? This one works if we know what a trigger is and what it's going to be. So if we can anticipate there's a test coming up, I'm going to be anxious. Or I have a conflict with a friend and I'm going to see them. What can I do to take care of myself leading into it? Is it listening to my favorite song, playing with my pet? Anything there. And then we want to take care of ourselves during. So these are the things. This might be breathing, taking a break, or any grounding activity, right? So the things that when we're in that escalated state, sometimes it's hard to do like the real work. So we have to get through it. So this is what's going on during a triggering event. And then we want to pay attention to after. This is the self-care after the fact of, if it's exercise, I don't know how to spell exercise. So if it's exercise, or that's where your music comes in, or hanging out with friends, something to recover from this. So we have the before, the during, and the after, because we want to start being able to control what that response is and what that looks like, so that you can live within this chill, neutral zone. So that is kind of the imagery that I like to use with that goes along with how we start to track our emotion or know where we are when there are things going on in our life, or to help our parents be able to pay attention of, okay, her tolerance is low today, that's why she's reacting. It's not that she's mad at me, it's that she had a really hard day at school and this is what she's responding to. So I'm going to choose not to take it personally, because I can see where she is on her track, or I know where I am, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut because I know whatever I say is going to come out negative because of where I am. I really like using this because it gives a language to take home and use in the family that says, hey, we're all going to use these words, this language, to kind of track where we are. So we're not talking at two different ends of a spectrum of kind of what's going on in our home. And while an individual has this, a family has this, a relationship has this, and we kind of start to pay attention to it. But we have to be able to name it to tame it. And that is by Dan Siegel. So I have to know what's going on inside of me to be able to take control of it, so that people around me know what's going on. So I like to use this. Feel free to use it. Feel free to share it, refer back to it. Ask me any questions you may have. Leave the questions down below. I would love if you shared it or responded. But yeah, that's kind of something, a psychoeducation piece that I like to share with my clients at the beginning of the very first session. So we have kind of that foundational piece of, what is our goal? What are we working towards? And how can we conceptualize it that it makes sense? So that's it for that. And if you have any requests or anything you'd like to see, send me a message and I will catch you on the next one. Take care.